Hello and welcome everybody to yet another live stream. And for those of you who are tuning here for the first time, we are hosting another hackathon, and this time it's with Hypermode. So if you want to hack something or build something cool before your holidays, now is the time. We are running a month long hackathon and we'll be talking more about it. And this webinar is all about what the hackathon is about and how can you build with AI and data models. So without any delay, I will be inviting our special guest on stage, and he's here. Hi Will, how are you doing today?
I am good. How are you doing?
All good. Are you excited for the live stream and live coding?
I am. Yeah, I think this should be a fun one.
Amazing. It's funny because whenever like I have live coded so many times, but every time I live code, there is some demo gods that show up. I'm praying hard that nothing as such happens with you and
Oh
it
no,
goes smooth.
something will go wrong. Just the question is, will we be able to figure it out and fix it? That is the question. Something will
Exactly.
definitely go wrong, though. I guarantee it.
Or you can just keep this, I always keep this and on my fingertips that it works on my machine. And here's the GitHub repo. Just run it and it will work on your machine, but it's not working right now.
There you go. I like that.
Amazing. Cool. So before we get started, what I'll do is I'll be sharing my screen a bit and I will be introducing our viewers to ModusHack. And then maybe we already had the first welcome webinar where Jay from your team he introduced us to Modus and he also showed a cool demo. So that video is already there on our YouTube channel. But well, if there might be new viewers as well who is joining us for the first time, so I would love for you to give us another introduction and then we can get started with the demo that you have prepared. Cool. Let me share my screen and in just a moment. Here we are. Hi, everybody. This is introducing you to Modus Hack, a month long hackathon. We just kickstarted it a week ago, which is on 1st of November, and you have time until 30th of November to participate and to get started. I have seen some of the cool things that you can do with Modus. We already have a recorded video on that. I'll share the link here on the chat so you can go ahead and see all the cool things that you can build with Modus. We also have $10,000 worth prizes. So now is the time to actually bring your creativity into action and build something really creative and fun with Modus. There's some app ideas that's there. If you are out of ideas, you can build on any of these ideas and build a solution and actually submit it. And for the submission guidelines, a few simple ones. First is just get started with Modus. You can join the Hypermode community and also the Hashnode community for any questions related to to Modus or Hypermode and Hackathon. And once you're done with it, just go to hashnode.com, write an article, and make sure that you are tagging it with the hashtag ModusHack. And that's how we will be tracking your entry. It should be an open source project, so make sure that you have a GitHub repo link. Do not miss a license. This is very important if it's an open source project. And an optional video demo or presentation is great. And if you're done with building a solution, you can spread the word about this on social media, tagging Hypermode and tagging Hashnode. So that's everything that you need to know about the hackathon. We have, if you don't even need to go to any links, just go to hashnode.com and you'll find a banner right there on the right hand corner on top. So just click on it, register, and you are good to get started. And if you need any resources, we also have it. And there is a lot of FAQs that are listed. So if you have any questions related to that, you can either find it here, or like I mentioned, you can join the Hypermode Discord channel or the Hashtag Discord channel and get your queries answered. So that's about the Modus hack. And if you have any questions right now, you can get it answered during the live stream as well. With that, I'll stop sharing and Will, the platform is all yours now. I'll be a silent spectator. I am excited to see what you are going to present. So let me know when you are ready and I'll bring your screen up.
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
Amazing. And in three, two, one, your screen is here. The stage is all yours.
Great. Thanks so much for the introduction. And hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today. This should be pretty fun. I'd like this to be as as interactive as possible. So feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat, and we'll dive into it. So this session is all about working with Modus, which is a serverless, I should say, an open source serverless API framework that allows us to work with AI models and other data sources. We'll talk about like what makes Modus interesting. We'll talk a bit about Hypermode, the company I work for that are the maintainers of Modus. If you want to grab the slides, you can get them at that link here, hype.foo, ModusHack dash data dash models, or scan that QR code. So like I said, my name's Will. I work for a company called Hypermode. My focus is on the developer experience role, which is a super fun job because it's basically my job to make sure that developers are successfully using our technologies, which involves doing like fun events like this, building things, talking to users and unblocking them, learning about what they're building, the challenges they're trying to solve. So super fun job. There's some of my socials and places you can find me if you want to connect. Feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat with folks. So this is like a rough outline of what we're going to talk about. Just I have a few slides to go over just to like set some context a bit. But really, I think most of this I want to do like a live coding demo to show how you can get started with Modus and really in the context of this hackathon, right? So we're doing this fun hackathon with Hashnode. So I want to share some ideas of hopefully inspire some cool projects that you can build, and show you from installing Modus at the command line all the way up to building an API that leverages data and LLM models. Is what we're going to look at today. So first of all, let's talk a bit about Hypermode and how Modus fits into the Hypermode ecosystem. So Hypermode is both the company and also our cloud hosting platform. But really, we're an open source company, so we build and maintain open source developer infrastructure and tooling. We're talking today about Modus, which is this open source serverless API framework, which we'll go into a lot more detail. So we'll skip over that one for now. But we also maintain other projects like dgraph, which is a graph database. Some folks may be familiar with a graph database concept. Graph databases, unlike relational databases that use a table for the data model, with a graph database, your data model is a graph. So think like nodes and relationships and how they're connected. And graph databases, in addition to having a difference in the data model, which allows us to think differently, to think about how our data is connected, graph databases have very different performance characteristics from relational databases. So in a relational database, when you're doing joins, so you're seeing where two tables overlap, this is like a set comparison operation. And if you're doing one or two joins, that's typically fine. You don't see a huge performance impact. But when you start joining across multiple tables, so maybe you're trying to find something like, for each user, find every order that they placed, and for each order, find all of the products, and for each product, find all of the, I don't know, like delivery addresses or who else bought this product. That's like a common recommendation query. That breaks down really quickly in a relational database, but graph databases are optimized for really, really quickly in near real time doing those traversals through the graph. So anyway, so that's dgraph. Dgraph focuses on scale and being able to address these near real-time queries. Hypermode, we also maintain the open source Badger project, which is an embeddable key value store, and also Ristretto, which is a fast cache library. Most of these projects are written in Go. Badger and Ristretto are used in within dgraph. There are dependencies for dgraph, so you can have an idea of what the architecture of dgraph looks like there. But there's a strong ecosystem and users of both Badger and Ristretto outside of dgraph. So we have users that are building with these tools, Modus, dgraph, Badger, Ristretto, as open source projects, putting those into production, hosting those outside of Hypermode. That's great. Like that's super valuable for a healthy ecosystem. But you can also host these projects on Hypermode, and our goal is really to be the best hosting and cloud experience for hosting these projects. Hypermode, which I don't have here, but Hypermode also is able to host AI models like LLMs, which we'll see an example of that in a minute. So one thing that's really nice, I guess maybe a double-edged sword perhaps, but we'll talk about the nice aspect of this. One thing that's nice about being a developer is that the tooling changes frequently, and I think typically for the better, right? It's like if we think back to like when I started building web apps, maybe this will date myself a bit, but I first started learning the LAMP stack, right? So like PHP, MySQL, and then we had kind of the mean stack like Mongo, ExpressJS, in a Node app. But the basic architecture kind of stayed the same. We had like clients, like web apps, mobile apps, hitting an application server that had business logic and logic for how to go out and hit the database. Data comes back and then respond to our client. And if we want to scale that application, well, we need to spin up another app server. We need to load balance those. We're using initially relational databases that like don't shard. Scaling is kind of a difficult problem. And things evolved, right? We evolved to like SQL databases that scale and are distributed. This concept of serverless entered the chat, so to say, where instead of having to think about the application server, and if I want to scale, I have to spin up another server and load balance that. Instead, serverless like Lambda functions allowed us to just think about code in terms of functions, and scale is built into that. We don't really have to think about how we load balance, and so that was like really powerful evolution in the way that developers are able to build apps. And I think we're going through like another huge evolution and shift right now in how developers build apps with the introduction of AI models and LLMs into the stack. So, this is not like using Copilot or something to help us write code. This is actually leveraging and invoking these AI models in our code, in our application, to add features and functionality to our web apps. And this is really a core piece of what Modus tries to solve for the developer, is taking these abstractions that have evolved in the way we build applications. So thinking about functions, thinking about models, and thinking about data and APIs, really trying to turn this concept of the three-tier app architecture a bit on its head. And these are the abstractions that we think about in Modus. So what is Modus? This diagram kind of shows like through the evolution of as we're building our application, right? So I said the abstraction is we write functions, and what happens when we write those functions? How does that get turned into an API? What happens when we make a request to this API? So that's what this diagram is trying to explain. So let's go through this. So to create an API with Modus, you'll write your business logic in functions. Currently, Modus supports AssemblyScript, which is a TypeScript-like language. It's almost like TypeScript, but not quite. and also Go. And we're looking to add more languages soon. So if you have feedback or are looking for support for certain languages, definitely let us know like what would make the most sense. So we're certainly interested in that feedback. But we're Modus is a polyglot framework, so supporting multiple languages thanks to WebAssembly. So I think this is really one of the superchargers and one of the more interesting aspects of Modus is that we leverage WebAssembly to build this serverless API. So let's say we write a function in TypeScript or multiple functions, hopefully, for our business logic. Then during the build process, the Modus framework is going to compile that to WebAssembly and prepare an invocation plan for each of these functions. Now, the other abstractions that I said that we work with in Modus are models, so AI models, and data. And so also during that, Modus also grabs configuration from an app manifest that defines what models and what data APIs or databases we're going to connect to. For data, these are things like HTTP APIs, GraphQL APIs, dgraph, Postgres, these sorts of things. And then based on the signature of our function and our type definitions, Modus is then going to generate a API schema, in this case, GraphQL. So currently we're building GraphQL APIs, looking to add HTTP alongside that. But you really don't need to know anything about GraphQL to be able to build a GraphQL API with Modus. That's one of the superpowers. All we need to do is write functions, declare types, and Modus will generate that schema based on the types that we define and on the signature function, which I think is really cool. So that gives us a GraphQL endpoint powered by WebAssembly. So then a web app or a client queries our GraphQL endpoint. And at query time, Modus will load your compiled code, so your compiled WebAssembly code, into this sandboxed execution environment. So this is another benefit of WebAssembly. WebAssembly allows us to support multiple languages and also gives us this secure sandbox, memory efficient environment. So each invocation of each API endpoint or each function call runs in its own sandbox, so that data and calls to the AI models are completely secure and not exposed, which I think is quite an important feature here. So then Modus sends a result and then releases your execution environment, freeing that memory. And this happens really, really fast. There is just a few second overhead of this concept of loading your compiled code into the sandboxed execution environment. So if you compare this with like Lambda, where you have hundreds of milliseconds or seconds cold start time, time to prepare the Lambda. This I think is really, really impressive and something that we're really wanting to benchmark soon to sort of show the difference and the improvement there. Okay, so that's at a high level how Modus works. If you're interested in a deep dive and learning a lot more about how this works under the hood, so to speak, definitely register for this event on November 21st. This is going to be with Matt from Hypermode, who is the co-creator of Modus and our most senior engineer. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, we'll also add the links right now in the comments. So if anybody's interested, you can register right away.
Yeah, let me see if can I grab the link to this from here?
Yeah, I already have it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, cool. All
Cool.
good. Great. Thanks a lot. Cool. So typically when we think of an API and frameworks like this, we're thinking of building the backend for an application or for a web app, and we certainly can do that with Modus. Like Modus can be the API and the backend for our entire application. But what I think is really a supercharger for Modus, and I think one of the more interesting ways that we can leverage Modus is by building specific features. So adding specific features to our application, and specifically where we want to add some AI and specifically LLM backed feature. And oftentimes we want that LLM to be interacting with multiple data sources or other LLMs. So that's where this concept of agentic workflows come in. So really, in my mind, this is the core use case for Modus initially, is adding LLM-backed agentic features to your apps. But in order to do that, we need like a few building blocks to be able to create these, agentic LLM backed features. What does that even mean? There's a lot of buzzwords there, and I think there are kind of three like key building blocks, or like three concepts to understand to be able to start building these features. And this is the functionality that Modus and Hypermode exposes. So let's go through this a bit, and then we'll hop into some coding and take a look at how we actually get started with this thing. So the first concept is chaining together data and your LLMs. So this is the case where I'm fetching some data from an API or a database, and I want to feed that into my prompt to an LLM. Maybe I want to enrich a data set. Maybe I want the LLM to do some analysis, some data processing, and then I want to take the results of that and I don't know, maybe add that in the result of my API call, or add that into a database. In the last webinar in this series last week that Jay from Hypermode did, he showed this concept. So his example was fetching random quotes, like a quote of the day from an API, and then taking the author of that quote, sending that to the LLM to say, hey, who is this person? Tell me more about this person. And then adding that into a row in a database, so that now we have like an enriched data set that has the quote, the author, and then like their bio, like detailed information about them. And you can imagine all kinds of workflows that leverage both data, oftentimes like your internal company data, or something like specific to your app, and specific to like the user's interaction with your app, and leveraging the power of an LLM call to enrich that. So that's kind of the first step for building these agentic features. The second is what's called function calling, or tool use. So OpenAI calls this function calling, Anthropic calls this tool use, but it's really all about using the LLM to make decisions about how to fetch data, or how to say like call an API to maybe like write a table to a database, or something like that. But you basically define tools, you define functions that the LLM can leverage to resolve a request. And this allows us to do things like handle natural language search, or something like that, where a user is saying something like, I don't know, find me 2-bedroom apartments in a certain city near the river that are available in this date, right? And the LLM can come up with a plan of what functions or what tools to use to go out and fetch that data, and then even go through the process of making the request to actually like book that for you, if that's a defined tool or a defined function that is available to it. So this piece, I think, is really important. This concept of function calling or tool use, where the LLM is making decisions. The third piece of this is what I call knowledge graph RAG. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation, where we sort of do a pre-processing step in maybe like a search request, or maybe we want to show like personalized recommendations to a user, something like that. And we first want to search our internal database. So business data and internal to us. What do we know about this user? What do we know about the thing that they're searching for internally? And we take the results of that and we add that to the context that we pass to an LLM invocation. And knowledge graph RAG sort of extends this concept of RAG to leverage a knowledge graph. So we're not just passing like single strings, like single pieces of information. We actually know like how that information is connected. We have some like connected semantic ideas about the concepts and the data, and the LLM can leverage that. And so when I mentioned the open source portfolio of Hypermode's projects that we maintain, and I mentioned dgraph, this graph database, this I think is where you can see like the pieces like really fitting together to enable really powerful LLM backed workflows where we can leverage dgraph. We can build a knowledge graph in dgraph. With Modus, we can connect to dgraph and leverage the knowledge graph to inform context for our calls to the LLM. So anyway, those I think are kind of like the building blocks to enable building these LLM-backed agentic features. We can work with all of these concepts in Modus and in Hypermode, which I think is really powerful. Cool. Well, that I think is enough of me talking. Let's take a look at actually building something here. So, how do we actually get started with Modus? Well, the easiest way is with the Modus CLI, so the command line tool for Modus, which we can install from npm. So let's switch over to the terminal here. Drop this down so we can see it. I've already installed it, but I think we can reinstall it again. So npm install -g hypermode modus CLI. And this will install the CLI command from npm. So now we have this Modus command that we can run, and we can see the commands available to us. So like we can build a Modus app, we can run one, but we can also run Modus new to create a new Modus project. And I think Jay showed this workflow in the live stream that he did last week. I think he went through Go. So I mentioned earlier that Modus supports both Go and AssemblyScript. So we're going to do AssemblyScript. So AssemblyScript is this TypeScript-like language that I mentioned earlier. We have a name generated for us. We'll just keep the default name. Yes, we want a Git repo, and we're all set. And so now the Modus CLI is going to check to make sure we have the most recent version of the Modus AssemblyScript SDK, and it's going to skeleton out our application. So in this case, we'll cd into Rogue Tactic, which is the name we got, and we'll run Modus dev to start our application. And so you can see we go through the build process here. It finds one function. This is just the like very basic hello world function that comes in the skeleton, and it started a GraphQL API locally for us. So that's cool. Let's stop this though, and let's go open this up in a text editor.
Which theme is this? Looks really cool.
I think this is Solarized Light.
I like this version of light mode. It's easier on the eyes.
Yeah, it's a nice like sepia tone, very calming. Yeah. Do you usually use the dark mode themes?
Yes, but I think the more I'm spending more time, I kind of am liking the lighter mode. I don't know if it's just me or a lot of people. I see this debate where people mention that I think light mode is better and dark mode is causing a lot of strain. So but I really love this one, so maybe I'll use this one.
Yeah, it's one of the built-in ones. I think just Solarized Light. I switch back and forth between Solarized Dark, which is kind of like a bluish one, and
Yeah.
Cool. So I opened up the project that we had skeletoned out, got a terminal going, and so we can see a few things here, a few things of interest. One is this modus.json file. So this is our app manifest. This is what is used to configure the endpoints and the models and the data sources that our Modus app can connect to. And so by default, there's just this single GraphQL endpoint. We can specify the auth model as well. By default, we use this bearer token option. This is disabled in development, so we won't be doing anything with this. But when we go to deploy this, like we won't do this today, but we can deploy this to Hypermode. Hypermode will handle that, generating the API token and this for us, so that our endpoint is secure. We can also pass like a JWT and inspect the claims in that as well. The other interesting bit here is our index.ts file. And again, this is assembly script, which compiles to WebAssembly, and it's very much like TypeScript, but it's not quite TypeScript. So, like for example, there can be some issues with like importing TypeScript packages if they're not built specifically for assembly script. Then sometimes that can cause some issues. So just something to be aware of. We're looking at adding like a core JavaScript TypeScript experience. There's some things moving in the WebAssembly ecosystem, I think, to support that soon. But anyway, assembly script for now, I think is a good way of having a TypeScript-like language that compiles to WebAssembly. So anyway, so we have one function, say hello here, that takes an optional string. It returns a string, and it just returns hello name if you passed it, or it says hello world. So let's give this a Modus dev. So this will build our app and start the GraphQL endpoint. So I'm going to switch over to, I think I run it here. Yeah. So this is Postman. I can make this a little bigger. So Postman is like a API explorer, supports REST and also GraphQL. So we're going to point this at our local GraphQL endpoint. And one thing that's nice about GraphQL is it has this concept of introspection. So we can ask the GraphQL API to describe its schema. So what are the fields? What are the types that are returned, and this sort of thing. And so the developer tooling for GraphQL is quite nice as a result of being able to build things leveraging this concept of introspection. So we can see that we can see what fields are available right away. Postman does that introspection query to figure that out. I should say we're working on adding an API explorer that would be more integrated with Modus and would allow us to query and explore the API. That's not quite ready yet, but that should be out soon. But for now, tools like Postman, or you can curl it or use one of the GraphQL clients in like React or a mobile app to interact with GraphQL. So you really don't need to be too familiar with GraphQL to be able to leverage Modus. And also, as I said, we're adding support for HTTP endpoints at some point. That's been a common request. Cool. So we can query this, and we get back hello world. If I add this optional field argument here, will, I get back hello will. So this maps to the logic defined in that function, and we can see that the type defs in GraphQL map to the signature of my function as well. Cool. Well, let's do something a little more interesting. Let's take a look at how we can leverage this concept of chaining together data from an API, from another data source, and in an LLM call. So there's an API that I like, which is the New York Times. So the New York Times, this is a newspaper in New York and in the US, of course. And they have a developer portal with APIs that you can like search articles, you can search their book reviews, and these sorts of things. One endpoint that I like is the most popular. So these are the most shared or most read articles for you can specify for how many days back you want to search, and so you get back something that looks like this. So you get back like the URL of the story, you get the title, description. One thing that's really cool is you get the they call them facets, uh, which are like the people, organization, locations that are mentioned in the article. You get back in an array. Also, any like images and things like that. So this I think is a really good API for sort of looking at almost real time news data, like at least daily news data. So we're gonna connect to this API, and what I want to do is pretend that our LLM is an editor at the newspaper, let's say, who's or maybe a copywriter, maybe is the better term for it. Maybe not an editor, but anyway, we're going to pass the LLM like the description or the abstract of the article, and we're going to ask the LLM to write the article title. So to sort of give sort of a alternative title, maybe we want to like A/B test titles on the web page. So we'll use an LLM to generate a new title based on the description or abstract of the article. So that's our goal. That's what we want to build. So the first thing we need to do is connect to this API in Modus, and in order to do that, this is an authenticated API, so we do need to generate an API token, but it's free. Like anyone can sign in to the New York Times developer site. This is developer.nytimes.com, and then create an app, I think is the flow. Oops, something happened here. Let me refresh. I think I already created an app. Oh, I didn't. There we go. I got signed out. So we'll sign in.
It's really cool that they have this, and I didn't even know that this existed. Really, really cool.
Totally. I'm constantly looking for APIs and data sources to build these kind of experimental projects, and I think so. So going back to the concept of the hackathon, which is why we're talking today, right? This is I think a common theme of like, okay, well, what data am I going to use in the hackathon for my project?
Exactly.
I need some data source, and that can kind of drive, I think, like the ideas. So hopefully, maybe if someone is interested in doing something with news for the hackathon, maybe this gives you some ideas of what you can do with news data, perhaps. And again, it's all free. You just need to create an account and create an API key.
On that note, what are some, let's say, three of your favorite APIs or any such APIs that you play around a lot with?
Oh man, that's a good question. Well, let's see. This one for sure. There's also an API for lobsters. If you're not familiar with
Oh,
lobsters, it's this like alternative to Hacker News, I guess, is a way to think of it. It's like a news aggregator,
okay.
um, and so they have like a front page, like a feed of news articles, like technical things, right? And you can access all the data through an API. I mean, similar to what you can on Hacker News.
Yeah.
I built a few projects using that. But really, I think my my favorite APIs are what I call like the unofficial API, where if you go into like developer tools and look at the network requests that a web app is making,
Yeah.
if they're like unauthenticated and return JSON, typically you can just like look at that endpoint and use that in your app. Since this is uh, election season in the US, like that's
Yeah.
always a fun one to go to like Politico or the New York Times like election result page. Go to developer tools, look at the network calls that web page is making, and oftentimes you have like all of the in the US anyway, like all of the county level election result data that you can just grab directly from that one JSON endpoint. So that's a fun trick. The unofficial API. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure.
Totally. Cool. So yeah, so you just like create a new app and then generate a key. So like I created one here, Modus News. Oh, it shows my key here. That's okay. We'll delete that later. I needed that anyway. Cool. Okay, so let's go back to VS Code here and see what we should do with that API key. So we need to get that into like secrets and environment variables, and how does that work with Modus? Well, um, Modus has a way of handling secrets that can leverage environment variables, but because we have this like very secure environment where we only want to inject like certain credentials and secrets into the function call, because each function call has its own like memory space. We don't want to just inject like all of the secrets declared for the whole app like that. That's not quite the security model we want. So the secrets are namespaced by the name of the connection that is declared in the modus.json file, which we haven't seen yet. We'll do this in a second, but here's an example. And so what we want to do is namespace this by like Modus, like New York Times API key. And so this is the .env.local file that was created by default in our Modus project. So I'm going to add now connections. So these are the data sources, so the APIs or databases that I can connect to, and so I can connect to an HTTP API or a GraphQL API or a Postgres database or a dgraph database. Need to set a base URL. What else do we need? We need query params. What did I do wrong here? Multiple schemas. Only one must validate. Oh, I see what I did. I forgot to. We need to name our connection. So this is going to be the New York Times connection, and then within that, we're going to have things like the type, the base URL, and query parameters. So here's where we need to add the auth header for the New York Times API, and its convention is it takes header API key, or not a header, rather, sorry, a query parameter that we need to append to the request. And so the convention Modus will allow us to use these placeholders, so 2 squiggles, and then this maps to the name of the environment variable using the name of the connection and then prefixed by Modus. So ours was Modus _NYT _ API key. So NYT here for the name of the connection, Modus for like our Modus app. And what's wrong with this? Doesn't match the pattern. Oh, we need to end this with a trailing slash. Cool. So we've added this connection now. Let's now write the functionality to connect to it. I'm going to cheat a little bit. So the first step, I should say the next step that we want to do is define the types that are going to map to the objects we want to work with in our API. So we're going to create a classes.ts file. And I'm cheating because I'm just going to paste these in. I wrote these already. But this maps to, like, if we look at the API docs, APIs, most popular, if we look at like the article, this maps, those types map to the schema of what's being returned by the API. And there's ways to generate that. But we have like an article that has a bunch of fields, and then we wrap that up in an article result. So an article result has an array of articles. Okay, so let's, we need to import the, spell import right, import HTTP from the Modus SDK, and then we'll also import article and article result that we just defined. And let's create a new function. We'll call this fetch news. And this is going to return article result. And so we're going to make this API call to the New York Times API. This is the URL for it. Let's do the most popular emailed 7. So this will give us the most popular articles within the last 7 days. And then we're just going to return response.json, which is of type article result that we defined just a second ago. And so when I save that, Modus is like watching and like automatically rebuilds. So if I go over to Postman and I can refresh to run introspection again, I can run this fetch news query. We get an error. I told you something was going to go wrong for us.
What are here?
What do we do? HTTP fetch failed. Probably typoed something, right? API New York Times was not found in the manifest. So we need to specifically declare our endpoints. Is it just because I didn't say HTTPS maybe? Let's try that again. Cool. There we go. So
Yay.
we get back. Let's add more to our selection set. So one thing that's nice about GraphQL is we only get back the fields that we request. So we need to specifically request the results object and then fields for each article. So here's a bunch of articles. We just had an election. So these are probably all like election news things, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. So now we have this API endpoint that's fetching data from New York Times and it's returning it. Like that's cool. But what we said we wanted to do was to pass this data. So like pass this description of an article. We want to pass this to an LLM and say, hey, LLM, please write me a title for this article. We already have a title, but we're going to have the LLM write one for us so that we can do like A/B testing or something like that in our web app. So let's update our types. So what we want is on the article, we want, I don't know, like alt, we'll call this alt title, I guess. That's a string. So we'll add that. And then let's go back to our fetch news here. And maybe just like let's use I don't know, like a default value. So instead of just here, let's simplify this. Let's just return a single article, and we'll say article is just like the first. Oh, well, this. How about we'll say this is our articles, and just to be explicit here, our article is just our first article. So one article object, and then let's specifically set the alt title just to like some placeholder, and then we're going to return article. Cool. So now this should still, and this should rebuild when we save it. So now if we go back to Postman, we refresh, fetch news. Now fetch news just returns an article. We can grab all the fields. We have this alt title. If we run this, we should see details about an article. And cool. Here's our alt title. So this is just the placeholder that we defined. What we want to do is pass this description to the LLM to give us the value for that placeholder. So to do that, what we're going to do is go back to Modus.json, and we're going to add a model. So earlier when I was talking about like the abstractions with Modus that we think about, we talked about data, talked about functions, and we talked about models. So that maps nicely to like what we're declaring here in our manifest. So let's name this text generator. We're just going to create like a generic function to generate text from an LLM. And our source model, we're going to use the open source Meta Llama model. We use 3.1 8 billion instruct version. And then we need a provider. We're going to grab this from Hugging Face. And then we need a connection or the host for it. And we're going to use Hypermode. So Hypermode, we said, is both like the name of the company, but also is the hosting platform. And so we're going to be invoking a model hosted on Hypermode, which is going to be pretty cool. So that allows us to develop locally, but still leverage these like super powerful models hosted for us for free in this case. But in order to do that, I need to create a Hypermode account and just connect this development environment to my Hypermode account. And the reason for that is, that functionality currently is provided for free. So we just want to, be able to track like token usage and this kind of thing. And, if we have some like paid hosted models or custom models, we want to be able to track that as well to our account. So to do this, we're going to npm install -g a different CLI, the hype CLI. So this will allow us to log in, create a free account on Hypermode. So we're installing this, and then I can say hype login, and this is going to redirect us to Hypermode in our browser and prompt us to create an account or sign in. I guess I'm already signed in, so that's cool. And I just need to choose the organization. I only have one, so cool. So now I'm connected. Let's go back to our code. Now I'm connected. I can run this model locally. So let's go back to our code here, and we need to create a function that uses this model. So let's create a new function. We'll just call this generate text. That's going to take an instruction and a prompt. I know we're getting close on time. Is it okay if we go a few minutes over, or should we
Yep.
finish right at the hour?
No, that's perfectly fine.
Cool, great. We're almost done. But that's great if we might go over a little bit. Let's import some things, I guess, some helpers before we write this function. So we're also going to need to bring in models, and I'm gonna cheat a bit and just copy some other imports here. So the Modus SDK has helpers for working with like the OpenAI compliant models and lots of other functionality for using like more advanced interfaces with models as well. So that's what we're bringing in here, is just the sort of helpers for working with the OpenAI compliant chat models. So, okay, first we need to grab our model that we declared in the manifest. So we're going to say get model of type OpenAI chat model. We called it text generator, I think. Models. There we go. Okay, so we've got our model. We need to create some input for the model. And in this case, we're going to need a system message, which is going to be our instruction. And we're going to need the user message, which is the prompt. So with models like these, we can say things like, you are a helpful chatbot, which is like the system message, the instruction, and then you have the actual prompt, which is like the thing that we want the model to do. There's some other parameters like temperature is a common one that we can tune. We'll set this to 0.7, which is kind of like the default that I typically use. And then we're going to invoke our model by passing the input. And again, the input is the instruction and the prompt. And we're just going to return, we just want to grab the text out of this. Message content trim, I think. Yeah, just grab the text. Cool. So that adds a new field in our GraphQL API. If we make some room here, fetch news we don't need, say hello we don't need, we'll refresh the schema. Now we have generate text. So we can say you are a helpful agent, and we can say, I don't know, like, what is hash node? Let's try that. And we get an error. Here's our second thing we need to troubleshoot. Let's see what we did wrong. Failed to invoke our model.
Is it something with the text generator name or something?
Yeah, I might have misspelled something here. Oh yeah, I'm missing an L here. Meta llama, maybe that's it. Let's see. I should say that there are a few different hosted models that are available that are hosted in Hypermode. So we can see in the docs like what those are. So I could have copied that from the docs, but cool. And we get back a response that Hashnode is a free open source platform for bloggers and writers to create and share content. Cool. So our LLM generated that based on the instruction and prompt. Now the next thing we want to do is let's go back to our code here. So instead of setting the alternative title just with our placeholder foobar here, we want to, well, we can just call this generate text function that we wrote, pass it the prompt that we want, which is going to be something like you're a newspaper copywriter, come up with a title for this article, and pass in the description from this article object that we grabbed from the New York Times API. So let's do that. So we'll just say article, alt title. Let's call our generate text function. Generate text takes two parameters here. The first one is going to be the instruction. So we'll say you are, how about a newspaper editor? And the prompt, how about, let's say, please copyright the title of a newspaper article based on this description. And then we need to tell it also to only respond with the article title text. These models are very verbose, right? So it'll say, if we don't tell it to only respond with the article title text, it'll say something like, here is the article title that you asked for. And because we want to return this in a JSON object, like this is not like we're not building a chat bot, right? Where that sort of preamble is helpful. We need to tell it specifically, what to return. We could also do something like few shot prompting, where we give it like a few examples of the format that we want to return. Like we could have the model return JSON if we wanted to feed that in, for example. But anyway, this should be good. So then we need to tell it like, okay, what is the description? So we'll grab the description from the article object. Oh, I need to change this into a template string rather than a regular string. Cool. So when I save that, Modus rebuilt our app. Let's give that a try. Let's see what happens. So instead of generate text, now we want to fetch the news. So this should give us, let's just say like what we're expecting, and we'll see if we get it. We'll see if this works. We should get back the details of just one article, because we just pulled out the first article, but we could do this for all articles too in that array. So we should get back like all the detailed information about the news article, like the title, its URL, description, and then in the alternative title field, we should have a title that the LLM wrote, our like LLM powered newspaper editor that should have written our like alternative title that we're going to like A/B test in our web app. So let's run that and let's see if it works. So here's some details. So the byline, the title. So here's the description for the article, and the original title is what? My Manifesto for Despairing Democrats. Okay, is the title. The alternative title we got is Surviving the Storm, How to Stay Vigilant and Maintain Your Integrity in Turbulent Times. That has a lot of alliteration. So I don't know, which one do you like better? The one that New York Times came up with, My Manifesto for Despairing Democrats, or Surviving the Storm, How to Stay Vigilant, blah, blah, blah.
I think the alt one is very powerful. The actual one is short and sweet, but the alt title is like it says a lot more. What do you think? Which one do
Yeah,
you?
totally. And we can tune our prompt, right? So we could say like keep the title as short as possible. So if we change the prompt and then run that again, now we get, now it's holding the line, right? So much shorter. So
Yeah.
we can this gets into like the whole like prompt engineering aspect of things. Like you can spend a lot of energy and a lot of thought tuning prompts to actually make the LLM behave the way you want it to. I feel like that's a whole sub area to dig into.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I know we're over time, so I'll wrap this up. That that was the feature we wanted to add, right? So just going back to our code and seeing what we did here, we created a new like Modus project from the CLI, from just installing the CLI, and we saw how that was skeletoned out. We saw how to define data connections, so APIs we want to connect to. We saw how to work with authenticated APIs for working with secrets and setting the authentication there. We saw how to define models, in this case, the open source Meta Llama model hosted by Hypermode. We saw how to connect our project to Hypermode to connect to that hosted model for free, which is super cool. We saw how to write functions in Modus that gets mapped to the GraphQL API. And then like the most important, like the core piece, so we saw how to chain together data, in this case coming from the New York Times API, how to chain that into a call to the LLM, and then return the results to add a feature, this LLM backed feature to our app, which in this case was generating an extra title so that we could A/B test that in our app. So that's all I wanted to show. I have a couple more slides I want to go through just to kind of point out some resources, really. So we talked about the ModusHack, the hackathon at the beginning. You went through that and talked about like the timeline and the prizes. There's a total of $10,000 in prizes. I should call out like one of the categories here, like the one I'm most interested in personally. That if I could enter the hackathon, this is the category I would enter. I wonder if I can enter the hackathon. I should check the rules to see if I'm forbidden from entering it or not. But the one that I'm most interested in is combining dgraph and Modus. Like I mentioned, dgraph is this scalable graph database. There's a lot of power around combining knowledge graphs and LLMs. So I think doing this like knowledge graph RAG that I mentioned earlier, I think is a really interesting thing to explore. So anyway, just wanted to point out there's a whole category for best combination of dgraph and Modus. And then I'll end with this list of resources. Register for the hackathon. Definitely join the Hypermode Discord, especially if you're participating in the hackathon. We have a ModusHack channel on our Discord with engineers from the team, like ready to talk about anything we can do to unblock you if you get stuck on something, answer questions. We're also going to be hosting some events in the Discord specifically for the hackathon. The first one we're doing next Tuesday at it's 6 a.m. Pacific. I'm not sure what time that is in India or APAC. Hopefully that's not too late. It's hard to find times that. Go
6 a.m. You mentioned 6 a.m. Pacific.
6 a.m. Pacific on Tuesday. Yeah.
Should be around 7:30 p.m. for us.
Okay, cool. So hopefully not too late then.
No, it's perfect. Yeah, 7:30 p.m. It's good.
Cool. So if you join the Hypermode Discord, you'll see the ModusHack channel. We're going to be doing hopefully like weekly events, just for folks to connect and share like ideas for what you're working on. If you want to find other folks to hack with, if you want to get technical Q&A feedback, and then we're also going to try to go through some demos and examples, kind of like what I went through today. Next week, Steph from the Hypermode team is going to show the updated version of an e-commerce demo that has like semantic vector search for really fast product search, and then also I think product recommendations. So that's what we're going to cover next Tuesday on the Discord event. So join the Discord for that. You can find Modus on GitHub if you want to follow or start the project to keep track of updates and releases. Documentation is available. And then we also have a Modus recipes code repo, which is where if you want to find the code that we went over today, I pushed this earlier today. Let me zoom in a bit. We have first of all, we have Jay's code here from last week. He did the Modus 101. So his version is in Go. He did something kind of similar with I mentioned with like grabbing data from the quotes API, passing it to an LLM, and then writing back to Postgres. So he did Go. If you're interested in Go, like what that looks like, check out Jay's code here. And then the one I went through today was ModusHack data models, which we did in assembly script. So yeah, that's the Modus recipes repo. I mentioned that event with Matt that we're doing to do like a deep dive into the architecture of Modus. So definitely register for that. And then this is a link to the slides. You can also just snap this QR code and that'll link to the slides as well. Cool. So that's like way over time, but that's all I wanted to share. I don't know if there are any questions or that in the chat. I wasn't really monitoring, but that's all from me anyway. Sorry for going over.
No, no, this is perfect. I loved the demo. I loved how you went through, and I think that what really piqued my interest was the D graph. So like that's an interesting thing to me. So I'll be definitely checking it out when over the weekend, since we have one coming up. And we do have some questions, but it's not related to Hypermode or Modus. It's mostly related to Hashnode. And if Libra, you're listening to us, you can contact Hashnode related questions to us on Discord. And I think that's it. And I have also shared some of the important links that you have mentioned here, including the slide. And also shared the Discord link. So if anybody here you have questions related to Hypermode, you can join them on their Discord, and this is the link to join. So with that, Will, I loved the demo. I loved the presentation. It was a great one for me, and I also hope our viewers had some fun listening to you like I did. With that, I guess we can end this one. And thank you once again for your time, and for everybody who has been with us till the end. Thank you so much for being with her till the end. And we'll see you in the next webinar, which will happen on Hypermode's channel. So make sure that you are scanning the QR right now, because that is where you'll get all the relevant information.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for organizing and hosting, and thanks everyone for joining. I hope to see you in the Discord. You can ping me there if you want to follow up with anything.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again. And with that, we will end this one.
Cool. Cheers, folks.
Cheers.